the head of the Democratic election board in New York City, or maybe just the head of the election board who happened to be a Democrat, talking about them driving people around in buses to vote in different parts of the city, basically voter fraud. Was that you guys, or is that somebody else?
Now that was us. We released that about a week or 10 days ago, and he's a Democratic commissioner on the New York City Board of Elections. He's very knowledgeable, very influential, and he was very convinced that there is voter fraud. He told us about it on tape. He told us how they do it, how they bust them around, and he told us that voter ID would be a means of stopping it. But he won't advocate for that. But now, of course, the mayor of the city and other members of the Board of Elections are all outraged that he told us the truth, and they're demanding that he resign and trying to censor him in other ways because he spoke honestly to us and told us exactly what is going on and how it's done.
Would he be covered under the whistleblower laws, even though he happened to blow the whistle in a bar after a couple of drinks?
I really don't know we're not experts in the whistleblower law, but I'm sure as a politician, he doesn't need the protection of some government agency. He's a well-known entity within the city of New York, and he's able to stand up and speak for himself.
Um, Outside of those two topics that we've touched on, what do you think are your biggest surprises so far in this election cycle?
Well, we've been at this for some 6 years now, going after voter fraud. And we keep uncovering and uncovering. Probably the most dramatic of all was a few years ago. We sent a young white kid into the voting precinct for U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. And Eric Holder is an African American and the U.S. Attorney General. This young white fellow went in and asked for Eric Holder's ballot, and they offered it to him. Now, we don't accept the ballot, and we don't vote on behalf of anybody. That's illegal. But they were willing to let him vote for it in the name of Eric Holder. Things like that instigated some 7 states to implement voter ID laws. Holder remained opposed to voter ID laws, but in his own voting precinct, he had a picture placed in the voting precinct of himself for future elections so that people would know if anybody asked for his ballot, it wasn't him. So he wanted voter ID for himself, but not for anyone else. The issue of voter fraud, and a lot of the pundits and talking heads on television will tell you there's no real history of voter fraud in the United States. That's not true. There's no real history of prosecution of voter fraud. It's not something that the state attorney generals or the county district attorneys go after and prosecute. It's just not of interest to them, never has been and may not ever be. But voting is the highest expression of our First Amendment right in this country. Nothing supersedes the right to vote as an expression of your First Amendment. And every time a person who's not qualified to vote is allowed to vote, it diminishes our First Amendment rights in this country. And that's just plain wrong. And it should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
If people wanted to help you out financially, how would they go about doing so?
Well, I think people should go to our websites and look at our volume of work. We have 2 websites. The most recent material has been released on projectveritas.action.com. projectveritas.action.com. Veritas, the Latin word for truth. And our other website is just plain projectveritas.com. There's a whole volume of material there, and if somebody wants to make a contribution, they'll find a method of doing that, and they'll find contact information if they want to mail it in to us. But we appreciate their support, their encouragement, and if they're willing to contribute financially and make this all possible, we have a large team of people that go out, like I said, eight journalists just alone on the Democracy Partners project. We have a huge editing staff and all. And we have lots of legal bills because they always come after us. The pathfinders always take the arrows. So they come, and we have not been found wrong yet. and we'll be criticized in many corners because they can't argue with the message. If you notice, these two videos came out. No one said there was anything wrong with what was in the video, and two people resigned or were fired from their jobs, but yet you'll hear all this nonsense about heavily edited and out of context. Well, boy, I think before somebody resigned, they'd have raised that issue. It just doesn't exist. It's attacking the messenger instead of dealing with the message, because they can't say, I didn't say that. It's right there in video. They did say it.
Well, as someone that's in TV, almost everything that ever makes it to the air has been edited to some way. That doesn't make it untrue. It just means you did 20 minutes worth of video and no one's going to watch 20 minutes, so you edited it down to the minute or two that was relevant to the story. It's still truthful, but if you had to talk to somebody for 2 hours to get them to tell the truth, no one's going to watch a 2 hour video to wait for the last 2 minutes of the video. It doesn't work like that, and everyone in TV knows it. It's just a phony argument.